In the same way that we must gaze at the stars or watch the firelight dance on the hearth, so are we drawn to the wild birds around us. The thoughtful have offered explanations for this attraction, usually in terms of our envy of the bird's freedom or ability to fly. Perhaps it is so, or perhaps there are as many explanations as there are people. Explained or unexplained, we can accept the relationships the birds offer us, and we can nurture and develop and celebrate them. For like us, birds have certain needs, some of which we can help provide for. Water is one need. Safety is another. Safety from harm and storm and cold. And food, the energy that drives the tiny hearts and wings too fast for us to see. There is a temptation to think of nature as something apart from man's world, something we don't see much of today unless we go somewhere for that purpose. The happy fact is, birds are all around us, all of us, all the time. In the middle of the city, the summer sky is laced constantly by chimney swifts courting and catching insects. Nighthawks course over the suburbs in the same pursuit. Swallows and phoebes nest on our porches and under the eaves of buildings. In broad daylight in Central Park in New York City, night herons cavort on lakeside rocks. What can we do to encourage birds to come into our backyards, to come closer to our lives? Is it all beyond our control? Are we to see the birds only by chance? Or can we issue a sincere invitation which the birds will appreciate and accept? An invitation to share our yards, even our homes, on a permanent basis. And if so, who can help us write that invitation? A great many people have become very knowledgeable about birds today. Many of them have gained their knowledge with the help of Roger Tory Peterson, originator of the field guide concept. Dr. Peterson's Field Guide to the Birds for more than 50 years has been the standard on bird identification. It is not surprising that Dr. Peterson's yard is home to many birds he has attracted there.
If you wish to attract birds to your garden around the home, the three most important things are food, cover, and water. In other words, the simple elements of life. I should say that of the three, food is most important to being able to eat. And there are many ways to give them food. We must first assess what they like. The seed-eating birds are the easiest ones to attract. The grosbeaks, the finches, sparrows, buntings. And they have rather conical bills for tracking seeds. So seeds like sunflower seeds are great for the ones that have stronger beaks. Actually, even the chickadees or the blue jays will eat those seeds, even though they're not seed-eating bills, you might say. They crack them open by pounding. The grosbeaks and the goldfinches, the purple finches and the house finches will come to the tray, and you can watch them right outside your kitchen window while you're having breakfast. It's great. I watch the birds from my studio window. In fact, I have feeders on all sides of the studio and all sides of the house, so I can watch from wherever I happen to be at the time. But the smaller little birds like goldfinches need smaller seeds, seeds like millet and cracked corn is of course a favorite with many ground-feeding birds. And not all birds will come to the feeding tray, so it's a good idea to spread a lot of the grain on the ground as well for those. Birds like the juncos and the white-throated sparrows, which prefer to feed on the ground.
Scratching like a chicken in the leaf litter, the rufous-sided towhee is conspicuous on the ground beneath seed feeders throughout the United States. The amount of white on the backs of towhees varies across the continent, but only in the extreme southeast does the eye become white. Doves, too, are handsome adjuncts to the banquet on the ground. The mourning dove, with its gentle, owl-like cooing, gleans spilled seed in all regions of the U.S. In the South, from coast to coast, the darting, sparrow-sized common ground dove comes regularly to seed offerings on the ground. And beneath feeders in Southern California, the spotted dove, a bejeweled newcomer from Asia, is now a regular. To reduce competition, it's best to have one feeding station for each type of seed, but the design of the dispenser makes little difference. Along the Rio Grande, this black-crested titmouse appears content with a feeder fashioned from a milk carton. If you can't tend the feeder for several days, a feeder which stores the seed in a bin will help keep the birds fed and the seed dry. Many designs are available from hardware and garden suppliers.
Of course, those birds that eat insects need animal food of some sort, and one of the best substitutes is suet, and suet can be mixed with peanut butter or other things.
If you want to give the insect eaters a real treat, make them a mixture of suet and peanut butter and cornmeal. Cook the suet to a liquid, and while it's hot, stir in equal amounts of peanut butter and cornmeal. You can smear it on the bark of trees, stuff it in natural cavities, or drill some holes in a stick and fill them with this high-energy food. All kinds of birds will eat this peanut butter mixture, including some which might not be attracted to your yard for any other food. This yellow-rumped warbler is an example. Or the ruby-crowned kinglet, a teardrop of a bird whose scolding stutter will let you know if the food has run out. Fresh fruit is another food which can attract some very interesting birds. This orange-crowned warbler, common in the West, is eating, of all things, an orange. In southern Texas, a golden-fronted woodpecker shows its taste for citrus, while the spectacular Altamira oriole waits its turn.
Some people have questioned the whole idea of feeding birds. They say, well, if a late bird is held over winter because you're feeding, does that mean that you take a chance on that bird's life? It might freeze to death. And don't you hold some of these fall migrants? I don't believe that for a minute. What you do get are these birds that would have been there anyway, perhaps enhance their survival by feeding. And actually, we've extended the ranges of birds very considerably by feeding. Because of the largesse of sunflower seeds and things of that sort, cardinals are now nesting all the way north to Maine. When I was a young man, you had to go to southern New Jersey to see a cardinal. And titmice were not found in New England. They were at the other side of the Hudson River. I suspect it may have been the George Washington Bridge that was the avenue of escape from New Jersey. They crossed, and now we have them all the way up to Massachusetts. Commonly, almost everyone up and down our road feeds birds. And as far as stopping feeding in winter, which is claimed is not a good thing to do, I don't worry about that now, because our sparrows will, finches and whitethroats will simply go to Mrs. Wood's place next door, or Mr. York's place up the road. They're not in trouble. Actually, what I do, I have someone feed our birds in the winter. But even if you can't, if you have a lapse of several days when you've got to go somewhere, today so many people are feeding that they have an escape valve there. Birds are survivalists. As to feeding birds in the summer, that has been questioned. I'm rather equivocal about that. The reason I feed birds at all is not because they need me particularly, but because I enjoy having them around, and they know a good thing when they see it, and so they come around. But in the summer, there's a natural source of food, plenty of insects. They don't need it one bit. It's for your pleasure if you do it.
And a pleasure it is, for in addition to the resident birds, there are some seed eaters which are present in North America only in the breeding season. A summer feeder presents the best opportunity to become friends with the rose-breasted grosbeak in New England and in the upper Midwest. Along the Atlantic, and Gulf coasts and westward as far as New Mexico, a summer offering of mixed seed may bring in the most spectacular colors flown in North America. They're worn by the painted bunting. Of course, it's unfair to provide a very tempting food supply for birds in a situation which may be dangerous for them. Driven by hunger in winter, they may feed almost anywhere food is available, even if the feeder makes them easy prey for cats or for natural predators such as the little sharp-shinned hawk.
Do not make our bird friends vulnerable by having the feeder out where some cat can sneak up on them quickly. Have some cover that birds can get into quickly and not leave them exposed. I think actually an exposed situation is more of an invitation to a bird of prey like a sharpshin, where the bird couldn't escape fast enough. For that reason, you should have a bush nearby that the bird can get into. Sharpshin wouldn't be able to get it if it was in the heart of that bush.
Any shrub with heavy foliage will provide safe haven. There are several hollies which are attractive and useful. Crepe myrtle, nandina, photinia are popular ornamental shrubs which guard small birds against attack and against winter's icy winds. Dogwood, blueberries, raspberries, cherry, grapes, and other fruiting shrubs and small trees provide fruit in season and cover the year long. But if you'd like to create a verdant haven for birds and other wildlife without the work and expense of doing the planting, let the birds do their own planting. A manicured backyard of grass is appealing to all robins and some humans, but without constant and costly care, the monoculture we call a lawn is quickly invaded by wild plants.
And birds will very often replant things. I know that sunflowers very often grow up not far from the feeding tray because a few of the seeds are dropped by the birds and they are never opened, and we have sunflowers. Rosa multiflora, the multiflora rose is a good example. Some people consider it a pest, but it's a gorgeous little flower, and the mockingbirds like it. The mockingbirds tend to distribute those rose hips up and down the road. Apparently, the seeds can germinate after they pass through a bird's digestive tract. So birds in themselves plant their own food.
To take advantage of this gardening by birds, allow an extra week between mowings early in the season and keep a watchful eye for the seedlings of wild cherry or mulberry. It's easy to mow around the seedlings we want to save for the birds. This entire hedge of cherry trees volunteered. That is, it grew from seeds passing through the digestive tracts of birds and was spared in a neat row by the mower. In early June, it is home to a cardinal family. By July, the cherries have all been eaten by birds and pie lovers, but a catbird family raises a second brood in the cherry hedge. In June, the fast-growing mulberry is heavy with fruit, appealing to humans and to the many species of birds feeding safely deep within the heart-shaped mulberry foliage. Purple stains on the laundry are a hazard, but if this looks colorful, just wait till the pokeberries ripen. The Japanese honeysuckle is rare and difficult to cultivate in its native range in Japan. In the U.S., though, it is an aggressive alien vine, all but out of control. But no bird will ever complain about honeysuckle in the U.S. because the protective curtains of foliage screen nests from all but the closest scrutiny, and the fragrant white blossoms mature into small black berries important all winter in the diet of soft-billed birds such as bluebirds and mockingbirds. Thistle seeds, which attract goldfinches to the feeder, are a bit expensive, and the goldfinches like them just as well taken directly from the plant. In fact, Goldfinches use the down attached to the seed to line their nests. Thistles germinate in autumn and spend the winter as a flattened rosette. They are easily recognized next spring by the spiked foliage, which becomes home to a diverse community of wildlife, including colonies of aphids, farmed and protected by ants. A variety of pollinators visits thistle flowers, and very often hummingbirds probe the torch-like inflorescences for small insects, which are a major source of protein. You'll have no trouble growing a few thistles just by carefully cutting a ripe roadside thistle head and scattering the seeds in an out-of-the-way corner of your yard or garden. The thistle watcher's rewards can be well worth the risk of a scratch. The red cedar, really a juniper, is a superb provider of food and cover. These house finches are among numerous birds which relish the fragrant berries of the cedar. As a result, rows of cedars may line old roadways where birds once perched on fences to plant the handsome evergreens. The dense foliage provides admirable cover for roosting and nesting birds of many species. Several perennial herbs and shrubs can be recognized and encouraged in the birder's backyard. Yule Gibbons was fond of a salad made from elderberry flowers and wine from the fruits. But the berries are hard to collect because birds also like them. Poke may be the all-round champion plant at attracting birds. After the seed of this tall perennial herb has been scarified in the digestive tract of a bird, it may lie dormant in the soil for hundreds of years, to germinate only after the soil is disturbed. A few poke plants are very likely to appear in a new garden or wherever digging has occurred. The persistent purple fruits should be avoided by humans, but they provide a sustaining banquet for migrating and wintering birds. Hummingbirds are easily attracted to a strong mixture of sugar dissolved in water. It can be dispensed from a test tube or from any inexpensive hummingbird feeder now commercially available. Table sugar is not harmful, for it is chemically akin to the nectar, which, as a natural food source, powers the hummingbird's intense metabolic rate, 40 times that of a human. Red food coloring is unnecessary and may be harmful. The birds must not be fed honey because they cannot digest it. Be prepared for a surprise visit by other nectar-loving birds, such as the northern oriole. Some bird lovers are rewarded more by the occasional glimpse of a hummingbird at a flower than by having them become commonplace at a feeder. Hummers will visit almost any flower, and they are particularly fond of impatiens and trumpet creeper flowers. The cardinal flower, common along shaded streams in late summer, is adapted specifically to pollination by hummingbirds. But if hummingbirds could be said to have a favorite flower, the vote would likely go to the mimosa. The mimosa tree, an oriental transplant and a statement of elegance in any garden, is constantly abuzz with visiting pollinators. Each blossom of the mimosa is a sachet of subtle fragrance, and during the summer months, hummingbirds are in constant attendance.
Outside my studio, my wife Jenny has created a butterfly garden just to attract butterflies. And of course, the birds enjoy the garden too, and particularly the hummingbirds, the little ruby-throated hummingbird. In fact, in this pond behind me, we have some cardinal flower, and every day the hummingbirds come to visit the cardinal flowers. In the garden, one plant that we planted for butterflies, the salvia, turns out to be much more suitable for hummingbirds. And this is true of some of the, particularly the long tubed plants like the ones that have spurs, such as columbines, flowers of that sort, that need that long bill of a hummingbird to penetrate for nectar or pollen. But you can actually attract hummingbirds by putting out something that looks like a flower, a hummingbird feeder with a big red entrance. But I would not use coloring in the sugar water that you're using. Coloring may have some chemicals in it, I'm not sure. There are many more kinds of hummingbirds in the West than there are in the East. And so it's natural that in California, people go into hummingbird feeding much more than we do here, and particularly in Arizona. There's one place called Mile High in Arizona where a dozen kinds of hummingbirds come to the feeders. It becomes a showplace. But here in the East, we have the ruby throat, but that's a lot of fun. And if you do have a hummingbird feeder, you may have the only hummingbirds in your neighborhood. So do think of them. Of course, there could be a problem with, the occasional problem with yellow jackets, which might take over the hummingbird feeder. I suppose the only answer to that is find the nest of the yellow jackets and remove it. I do not believe in spraying because that may eliminate certain insects, but that also makes the birds have a little more difficult time to make a living. In fact, I prefer to have a certain attractive insect life around. There are very few insects that are pests, very few. I don't see why we have to give the electric chair to all of them, including the butterflies and the pretty moths and so on. They're part of the ecosystem. Water is important because just as we need water, so do birds. They need it for bathing, or at least once in a while to get rid of the discomfort of lice or parasites. I presume that's why they bathe. At any rate, birds love to bathe, given the chance, particularly in the summertime.
Water is extremely important to birds. Most birds bathe several times daily, and they need water to drink. They bathe to keep their feathers clean and in good functioning condition, and to get rid of parasites. Some like to wash or moisten their food. Birds may need water more in winter than they do in summer because fruits and the moisture-laden bodies of insects are not as plentiful in winter. The warm water you provide with a bird bath heater may be the only unfrozen water for miles, and the response can be a delight. The bird bath is a simple and very effective way to provide water for birds. The slope of the sides should be very gradual, and the maximum depth should not exceed 2.5 inches. Birds like to inch cautiously into their ablutions, and they usually bathe in less than 1 inch of water. This yellowthroat uses less than 1/2 inch, but gets as wet as if he had plunged like an osprey. Probably no single attraction in the bird lover's backyard will host a greater variety of visitors. All North American birds, with the exception of a few desert types, will bathe regularly if given the opportunity. Against a low sun, the birds create a cascade of light in their endless enthusiasm for the bath. If still water is attractive, falling water is irresistible. In experiments, birds have been seen to go through the motions of bathing merely at the sound of running water. A recirculating stream is ideal, and though more easily described than constructed, can be created with electric pumps sold for the purpose at gardening stores. But a retired bucket with a small hole in the bottom has the same effect.
If you just have a simple bird bath, the way to attract the birds to that bath is to possibly have some kind of a drip thing from a hose or some other source, because the dripping of water, even if it's very slow, will attract birds. You don't want to have use up all your water by having a constant stream. You can just have it at its minimum flow, or just the drip, drip, drip. That seems to do the trick.
If you'd like to go a step beyond providing a bird bath, you might look into the feasibility of creating a small aquatic habitat in your backyard. Elizabeth and Edwin Clarkson at Wing Haven, their home near the center of the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, have created a lush, formal garden of plants especially for birds. This masonry pool in the gardens at Wing Haven has attracted nesting pairs of wood ducks for the past 17 years. The Clarksons have hosted as many as 7 active wood duck nest boxes in their garden, in all likelihood populated by ducks born in earlier years in these very boxes. The conical top on these metal nest boxes discourages predators. The preferred natural nesting quarters of the wood duck are abandoned holes of the pileated woodpecker, so the opening should be 4 inches in diameter and about 16 inches above the floor of the chamber. Of course, wood ducks are not the only birds to respond to a small pool or pond in the backyard. It takes only a few reeds and cattails to provide habitat for the red-winged blackbird, known for its tireless singing and vigorous territorial defense. From perches near the water, kingbirds like to hawk insects. Tree swallows and barn swallows skim the surface for insects and sometimes bathe on the wing. The smallest pool with its surrounding vegetation is likely to host the secretive little green-backed heron, the black-crowned night heron, or perhaps the grand fisherman himself, the great blue heron. Willows often volunteer at the edge of freshwater pools, and willows are the favorite habitat of the yellow warbler. And where the yellow warbler goes, so goes the cowbird, ever watchful for the chance to slip an egg into the yellow warbler's nest and avoid the responsibilities of parenthood. The bird lover who builds a pond often stocks it with edible plants such as duckweed and duck potato, and with aquatic or emergent cover plants including water lilies and cattails. Garden suppliers can provide nearly a complete pond ecosystem, including the young of fish and frogs. When night falls, the music of the pond life is a resonant reminder of the closeness of nature.
You'll notice those green frogs in the background. We built our pond mainly to attract the occasional kingfisher and birds that come to bathe. In fact, we have quite an acreage here, so we could afford space. But we're on the top of a hill, so that pond had to be created. We gouged it out with a bulldozer, put a cement lining in the bottom, and we had a pond. Somehow these frogs found it. We didn't put those frogs here. They apparently were in migration or traveling, as frogs do at night. And we've got more green frogs now than I remember us ever having. We have some turtles, but we put the turtles in. That is a bullfrog, incidentally.
Ultimately, those who tend their aquatic habitats yield to the beauty of the waterfowl, those wandering messengers from the far northern wilds. Waterfowl raised from hatchlings in your backyard pond will, if conditions are suitable, stay, or will return periodically, perhaps to nest. The hooded merganser may share a nest and incubating duties with the wood duck hen, so the same nest box simulating a pileated woodpecker cavity in a dead tree serves both species. This little ruddy duck drake could be defending his nesting territory in a mountain tarn in the Canadian Rockies. Yet his home today is a backyard pond on Maryland's eastern shore, where he was raised and has elected to stay. Notice the grid of very fine monofilament at 3-foot intervals covering this pond. The ducks can fly through it, but the grid shields them from the slanting stoop of the great horned owl, also a waterfowl enthusiast. If one is so fortunate as to have a wooded backyard graced with running water, there are some special opportunities. The northern water thrush, actually a warbler, may claim part of your stream in its linear nesting territory. The drab back, streaked breast, and above all, the continuous swaying hind parts are distinctive as the water thrush probes the stream for insect larvae. The little spotted sandpiper, a bird similar to the water thrush, also dances a non-stop hula and occupies the same wooded streams. And on occasion, you will have evidence that the barred owl, with its weakness for crayfish, is also a fancier of streams. When we speak of birdhouses, we tend to visualize a little box in which just about any bird might live. But not just any bird will nest in a box. Only those whose natural nesting quarters are abandoned woodpecker holes use boxes. And birds don't really live in birdhouses. They nest there. And when they're finished nesting, and that takes only a few weeks in spring or early summer, they're finished with the birdhouse, except perhaps as a roosting shelter on winter nights.
A number of birds nest in bird boxes. They naturally are the ones that would, in the wild, either use an abandoned woodpecker hole or perhaps some hollow tree, cavity in a tree. That would mean birds like chickadees, titmice. Of course, house wrens do. And the house wrens are easy to attract. In fact, these days I don't suppose house wrens nest hardly anywhere else. Even screech owls will nest in a bird box. Even barn owls have been known to nest in bird boxes. Barn owls regularly. In fact, in New Jersey there has been quite a program of attracting barn owls. Sometimes birds will use the boxes they nest in summer as a kind of a winter shelter. Chickadees do. Bluebirds invariably do. In fact, sometimes as many as a dozen bluebirds will crawl into a box intended for them.
The bluebirds, eastern, western, and mountain, are cavity nesters, and perhaps more readily than any other birds, the bluebirds accept nesting boxes. They keep their homes clean by carrying away the young's waste after feeding visits. The box should have a 5-inch square floor, and the entrance hole should be exactly 1.5 inches in diameter and 6 inches above the floor. There should be a provision for opening any nesting box for annual cleaning. The box must be placed in an open space and in the sun on a post 4 to 6 feet above the ground. It's important not to place more than one bluebird box in your yard. 2 or more boxes result in territorial squabbles and parental time wasted at the expense of the young bluebirds. Ultimately, only one box will be used, and the others will be filled with false nests by the prevailing pair. The tree swallow, so called because it is adapted to nesting in the same downy woodpecker holes used by the bluebirds, may in some areas of the U.S. compete with bluebirds for nest sites. Occupancy by a tree swallow family is fair cause to put up a second bluebird house. Chickadees and titmice of several species across the U.S. also accept nesting boxes. Because they are forest birds, chickadees and titmice are accustomed to nesting in the shade and prefer that the box be on a tree or post at wood's edge. The box should be slightly smaller than the standard bluebird house, and the entrance hole should be exactly 1 1/8 inches in diameter to exclude larger birds. The same size nesting box is attractive to the house wren, with one modification. House wrens, relative to their minute size, carry large sticks for nesting material, and it's hard for them to negotiate a round hole with oversized building materials. Make the entrance a slot 1 1/8 inches high and several inches long rather than a round hole, and you've got a tenant. This tireless mite commonly raises 3 broods in a season, often using different nest sites for each. A third size of single-family nest box accommodates 1 or 2 species of larger birds. To interest a crested flycatcher, build a box with a 6-inch square floor and an entrance hole 2 inches in diameter and 8 inches above the floor. Mount the house on a post 10 feet or higher at wood's edge. A skirt of sheet metal will keep snakes and other predators from the nest box. To attract a flicker family, make the box a few inches deeper and leave some wood shavings inside. This brings us to the birdhouse builder's big challenge, the martin house. The purple martin is North America's largest swallow, and it has a prodigious appetite for flying insects. Martins are colonial nesters, and several pairs like to share close but separate quarters. A single house with a dozen nesting chambers, each a 6-inch cube, will start a martin colony. The entrance holes should be 2 1/8 inches across and 2 1/4 inches above the floor. Martin houses are an opportunity for design innovation and architectural elegance. But long before North America was invaded by the white man, who now furnishes the majority of nesting space used by martins, Native Americans attracted martins to rows of hollow gourds hung from poles. If the design of martin houses is of aesthetic interest to the property owner, placement is of prime concern to the martins. The presence of water is attractive, but not essential. It is essential that the martin house be surrounded by plenty of open space to accommodate the big swallow's wide hunting sweeps. And the house, or gourds, should be on a pole about 14 feet above the ground. Starting a martin colony may take persistence, but an elevated structure within adequate open space should attract them. Later generations usually return to nest where they were born, and each year the returning number will probably increase. Check with successful martin hosts where you live to see when the birds arrive. On the expected day, and not much before, erect the martin house. If the martin house is allowed to stay up all winter, it will be usurped by starlings, and the martins will have no place to nest. An innovation in martin house design is the use of aluminum, lighter for easier maintenance, cooler because it reflects heat, and cleaner because the non-porous surfaces discourage mites. Perhaps aluminum's most appealing property is that starlings do not like to nest within its bright, shiny interiors. There is a category of summer birds usually on the edge of our awareness because they do not eat the food we offer nor nest in the shelters we provide. Yet they are close to our daily lives. What can we do for the catbird? Share perhaps the blueberries we plant and let them nest undisturbed in the cherry hedge. For the brown thrasher, roadrunner of the East, we can let honeysuckle grow for nesting cover and pretend not to notice the missing dog food. We can strike a bargain with the barn swallow, tolerating the mess under its nest in the garage and leaving the door open once they start nesting. We might condone or even create a mud puddle for them to use as masonry for their nests. The cliff swallow asks only a place under our eaves and access to the mud hole. The payoff is in insect-free evenings on the patio without the sound of a bug zapper frying innocent moths. The robin asks little of us in return for endless song. Some honeysuckle in a redbud tree to nest in. A cat-free lawn to glean for crawling critters. And safe haven in which to teach the trade to its speckle-breasted young. The house wren, a true victim of the work ethic, might ask that you park the old pickup truck for a few weeks while it brings off a brood in a broken taillight. A little space in a crevice in the woodwork will do for another. The eastern phoebe broods her young atop a porch column, where home is as much the happy gabble of human voices as the call of her own name. From deep within the interior of the house come chirrs and twitters, easy to pretend not to hear, lest we question the state of our own psychic repair. It's only the chimney swift returning to feed its young the booty of the day's aerial combat with the winged insects. Can we help the swift? All we can really do is make sure the thermostat doesn't stoke up the furnace on a cool summer night. And let the noises from within test our imagination. See if we can match the sounds with a feeding visit, or one of the adults fanning the young in the day's heat, or the young testing wings which on their very first flight must carry the fledgling 20 feet straight up, and into a lifetime of whole days spent on the wing and whole continents passing beneath. The killdeer nests as comfortably on the flat gravel rooftop of a shopping center as on a riverside sandbar. Feigning its own death, the killdeer leads us away from the nest with a plaintive deception. But should that fail, we see in this bird of the weeping voice a study in courage. Come winter, there is peace to be made with the yellow-bellied sapsucker as it inflicts minor phlebotomies on our trees. We can take comfort that there is no permanent harm to the tree, for the wounds will heal with spring's first growth. Meanwhile, almost every other small bird who winters with us will share in the wealth from the sapsucker's wells.
People do many innovative things about birds, about attracting birds. In fact, if you're lucky enough to have an osprey in your area, you can attract an osprey by putting up a pole with a platform on top. Many of the people here in Connecticut do that. We are not fortunate enough to have a pair of ospreys on our place, but they fly over almost every day. So we put up a pole, and it may work. And another thing, anyone with Canada geese around can make a secure place by putting out some sort of little floating island, like a rubber tire, perhaps, and a little platform, so that the raccoons can't get out to the nest. That's a good thing. People do that for loons in Maine and in New Hampshire. There's quite a loon society now that just is for the purpose of monitoring loons and attracting loons. There's so many things we can do. I don't think all of the ideas have been fully exploited. There's so many that we can perhaps improvise ourselves. Just use imagination. As examples of that, in attracting birds, there's so many things that can be done that do not involve food particularly. Actually, I have a friend who feeds a red-shouldered hawk that comes to his feeding tray by putting out moribund mice on his feeding tray. And this red-shouldered hawk has actually been seen feeding on a mouse at one end of the tray while evening grosbeaks were feeding on sunflower seeds at the other. Well, that's a rather innovative idea. I'm not suggesting that we all put out things for red-shouldered hawks, but I have friends who actually feed vultures. If you're interested in turkey vultures or black vultures. We have a local dump where, not far from here, where deer that are killed on the highway are put. And that maintains a whole flock of turkey vultures, just those roadway killed deer. So there's so many things we can do. I'm not suggesting that we become as specialized as that. But while we're on this business of innovation, one of the most extraordinary things that I saw recently was a leased tern colony on the roof of the Sears and Roebuck building near Biloxi, Mississippi. And this was in the shopping mall. And here these birds are quite safe. No one is going to climb up there. No raccoon is going to go up there. And 1,000 young terns were fledged on the roof of that building last year. The management was a little equivocal about that tern colony because some of the people who lived there, or I should say worked there, their cars were decorated a bit like a Jackson Pollock drawing. But aside from these occasional complaints, everybody loved it. Most of the people loved to have those terns flying around.
Enhancing a commercial property by making it attractive to birds is an idea worth exploring. Perhaps at a very deep level we find the same sense of place and refuge appealing that birds do. If a single entrepreneur can enhance a place of business with bird life, why not a whole community? The town of Stone Harbor, New Jersey did just that. What might seem like an ordinary residential community becomes an exceptionally attractive neighborhood because across the street is a 20-acre marsh set aside years ago as a refuge for herons and ibis and dozens of other birds which nest or visit. So a town that otherwise might be like so many others becomes unforgettable and endlessly enjoyable to those who live there. The joys of living with birds sometimes present problems and challenges. For example, it is a common mistake to assume that any young bird on the ground needs help beyond keeping cats away from it. It is normal for many birds to fledge before they can fly, and all birds are under parental care for days, weeks, or perhaps months after they leave the nest. These young mockingbirds are enthusiastic about the suet peanut butter mix, but even though they are fully developed physically, they will not eat unless fed by an adult. And this immature red-bellied woodpecker can fly like a rocket through the trees, but its ceaseless food cries indicate it is still on the dole. A brace of young doves, still in the begging habit, tries to mooch a meal from a starling. The starling is having none of it. A period of dependence on the parents after fledging is normal. In most cases, if the fledgling is mobile, as this young grackle, it does not need help. The parents are close by and are feeding the youngster regularly. In a few days, it will be on the wing and in much less danger. If an obviously helpless nestling has fallen from the nest, try to return it to the nest. If you can't find the nest and you want to take on the responsibility of feeding the young bird, try to simulate the care a nestling gets from its parents. A mixture of canned dog food and boiled egg yolk is often successful, especially if the mixture is supplemented with soft-bodied insects. It's best to feed by the same schedule that the bird's parents would, several times each hour during daylight. Don't try to force feed or give a young bird water because they don't know how to drink while in the nest. Just moisten the food. And even during summer, a naked nestling may need to be warmed.
One of the problems with all the plate glass windows we have now is that certain birds, particularly thrushes and birds that like darkness, will fly into them. Thrushes are particularly vulnerable, and I think if you were to take the number of plate glass windows in the country and multiply, say, the average of 3 birds a year killed on each, millions of birds would be killed by plate glass windows. But there's a way that we have used here. In my studio, I have kind of a decorative thing which indicates that that's something, that's a surface. They are available commercially, including the ones that are like peregrines or like sharpshins or like Cooper's hawks. Not many of the birds of prey would bother small birds, because that's rather a fallacy that most birds of prey are bird eaters. Most of them are not, but there are several that are. Mostly the sharpshin and the Coopers when it comes to birds that would bother a feeding tray. You'd never expect a peregrine around a house feeding birds. At least I wouldn't.
Squirrels like sunflower seed as much as birds do. They can park in a feeder and gobble seeds to the exclusion of the birds. Yet they can be beaten at their own game with unstable shields, such as this design. Here, the squirrel is obliged to rummage on the ground like a proper rodent, while the birds enjoy sunflower seed above. Of course, there is a more charitable view.
There are always problems. It's like the raccoons at your suet feeder. We do have raccoons, and they come at night, and with those clever little fingers, they remove the suet. So we've got to find a way to get around them. We love raccoons, but on the other hand, you can suspend your suet feeder in such a way that they can't get to it. But they're pretty good at figuring out things. Even gray squirrels will figure out ways to jump onto a feeding tray that you think is quite squirrel-proof. But what we do, we simply put out enough for all of them. And the squirrels will have their turn, chipmunks will have their turn, and then the birds will have theirs. It's in other words, we love all things. I'm not sure about yellow jackets. There are a number of good books on attracting birds, which give many of these innovative ideas. One of my favorites is the book by John Terrace called Songbirds in Your Garden. In fact, that book is, I believe, over the years has had a sale of over 500,000 copies. It's being reissued. And then there's that one by George Harrison, The Backyard Birder, which is a good one. And another very recent one, and quite innovative, and with many innovative ideas, is the one by Stephen Kress, The Audubon Society Guide to Attracting Birds. So there are many, many good books.
If it's excitement you're after, come fishing with the experts from 3M Scientific Anglers and learn ways to catch more and bigger trout on the fly. You'll learn where to find trout in a stream and ways to present the right fly with the perfect cast so you can catch the most elusive trout during hatch and non-hatch situations. Plus, there's steelheading for 20-pound rainbows or going for the ultimate saltwater challenge. Let 3M Scientific Anglers bring home the excitement while you learn a lifetime of mastery techniques that will help you become the best fly fisherman you can be. There's no other sport like fly fishing. It can truly give you a lifetime of discovery and enjoyment. Whether you fish your own favorite stream or travel the world with your fly rod, there's no end to what you'll learn. To help speed you along your path of discovery, Scientific Anglers from 3M has recruited some of the world's best fly fishermen to produce a complete learning system of videotape programs. Unlike simple how-to videos, the Scientific Anglers Mastery Series shows you more than just tips. It gives you an easy-to-learn formula for success to truly help you become a master angler. There are programs designed to give you a strong foundation of knowledge and skill. At the next level, the Mastery System helps you integrate the skills and knowledge into sophisticated fly fishing strategies. And for the expert, there are challenge-level programs that offer original and innovative techniques to help you master the most difficult fly fishing situation. Think of it as a learning path towards fly fishing mastery. The tape you just viewed is part of that path. In Doug Swisher's Trout Series, Scientific Anglers presents a 4-part program that features a natural learning progression. First, there's basic fly casting, where you learn loop control and the principles of throwing a perfect straight line cast. Then you move on to advanced fly casting, building your skills with more complex casting techniques, including curve and reach casts. Now you're ready for action as Strategies for Selective Trout shows you how to fish a hatch from bottom to top. And you'll almost feel the strike as Doug demonstrates ways to take difficult trout in non-hatch conditions. Finally, in Advanced Strategies for Selective Trout, Doug teaches you his most sophisticated methods, including ways to successfully fish the midge, how to unlock the mysteries of masking hatches, and special streamer tactics to catch big trout. You'll be part of the action as you look through the eyes of the expert and learn the real whys behind the mastery of fly fishing for trout. While you're improving your streamside skills, you may also want to learn to tie your own flies. Gary Borger shows you a step-by-step approach to the basics of fly tying. And Doug Swisher demonstrates how to tie flies to match the hatch and his deadly attractor patterns. If you're hooked on catching the big ones, you've got to see the 4-part series on fly fishing for Pacific steelhead. Lonnie Waller and Jim Teeney will provide you with a complete arsenal of skills so that you can take these giant rainbows, even in the most challenging conditions. But that's not all. Scientific Anglers takes you south to watch world record holder Billy Pate demonstrate his secrets of success for hooking up and landing the ultimate fly fishing game. And if you love fishing, hunting, and other sports, think of 3M as your total video resource for outdoor adventure.